The following is the heart-wrenching story of one of the most gruesome bear attacks on children ever recorded in the 20th century. A black bear who all of a sudden turned into a serial killer, viciously attacking and killing 3 boys one after another. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying story of the man-eating black bear in Algonquin National Park. Welcome to Final Affliction. On May 14, 1978, 4 boys between the ages of 12 and 18 had gone out for a relaxing day of fishing in the Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario, Canada. 18-year-old Richard Rindress and his younger brother William had invited 12-year-old George Halfkenny along with his 14-year-old brother Mark to practice fishing in the Radiant Lake in northeastern Ontario. It was a calm lake surrounded by pristine wilderness and thick forest. The water hosted trout, bass, and a variety of smallmouth fish. The wider park had several species of mammals, including moose, deer, and beavers. But among the trees lurked a predator. The famed black bear was known to inhabit the deeper forest, but seldom had encounters with humans. The large furry mammal could weigh over 450 pounds and stand taller than an average human on 2 feet. However, they weren't known to be aggressive unless provoked and usually kept themselves deep among the forest wildlife. It was early summer in Canada, and the warm heat of the sun had created an ideal fishing escape among the trees, and the fish were plentiful. The boys parked their car near the Radiant Lake and ventured off for a catch. It was a serene experience for the young boys, as the summer sun heated the once frozen trees and lakes, making the hungry fish resurface to take the baits. The entire day went by and the boys were ecstatic with their catch. A few hours later, the sky started to dim as sunlight faded and evening set in. Unknown to them, an apex predator's eyes had been locked on them from among the dense trees. A hungry black bear had ventured too close near the lake where the boys had been fishing. The dark forest, aided by the dimming sunlight, helped the black bear camouflage itself in the background. The ambushed predator stalked the boys along the trees and was aided by the silent crunch of the cold, wet leaves that littered the forest floor. As dark set in, the 4 boys headed back to their car to sort out their catch before leaving. Parked a few hundred meters from the lake, the young boys were prepared to drive away. George Halfkenny, tempted by the good catch throughout the day, decided to give it one more try before the sky went completely dark. He decided to walk to the lake alone after telling the other boys he would be back in a few minutes. He cast his hook one last time into the clear waters, hoping to catch a big one to take home. But by this time, 12-year-old George Halfkenny had become an object of interest for the giant black bear lying in wait among the trees. Caught alone and unable to defend himself, George was quietly ambushed from behind by the forest predator. As it stood on its 2 hind legs and slammed its feet onto the young boy's fragile torso, George could only let out a light squeal, unheard by any one of his friends, before being dragged away by the massive bear. He died a quick death, but his final moments were in terror and pain, as the bear towered over the young boy before breaking his neck using its body weight. A few minutes passed and George had still not returned. The boys had been waiting for him and wanted to leave before night set in. They called his name from afar into the dark, empty forest, but there was no response. Something was eerily wrong, and every passing minute made them concerned for George's safety. William and Mark finally decided to walk to the edge of the lakeshore and look for George, but there was no sign of him. But unbeknownst to them, their cries and calls for their friend were heard by something else. The predatory black bear had been alerted by the sounds and decided to leave George's body in the woods to come back for more, this time for William and Mark. The boys were now worried and trembling from the fear and cold. This is when they made the fatal mistake of going deeper into the trees to look for him. Walking among the bush trail in tight forest, Mark separated from William, trying to find his lost brother. The bear appeared from between the trees, and Mark quickly found himself jumped by a mass of black fur. The bear ended his life in a similar fashion, breaking his neck with its body weight before dragging him away into the forest. The little boy could offer little resistance and died a quick death. The area once again fell silent, and William realized something was terribly wrong. His heart started racing, and he let out cries of help, calling on his friend and brother. The bear now had 2 dead bodies, but was not done with the hunt. William was alone. He was now deep in the predator's area, hopelessly lost and vulnerable. 16-year-old William was terrified out of his senses and tried running to safety among the confusing maze of forest trees. The giant black bear again started chasing him, stealthily following his voice and scent. A brief chase, and William was ambushed from behind by the black bear in a similar way it had killed Mark and George. The frail young boy was no match for the bear's massive weight, its sharp claws or biting teeth. He succumbed to the attack in a few seconds and became an addition to the pile of dead bodies that the bear had been collecting after dragging them into the forest. 18-year-old Richard Rindress awaited the return of the other 3 boys and was left puzzled by the sudden silence that befell the scene after their calls for George could no longer be heard. The boys seemed to disappear one after another in an eerie fashion, with no idea of what happened to them. Reluctantly, he walked further a few meters close to the shoreline in hopes of finding a sign of his brother and friends, but to no avail. He noticed only a drop fishing pole beside the water, surrounded by a thick forest. It was the dark of night, and Richard was too unnerved to dare venture deeper into the woods for fear of meeting a similar fate as the other boys. He hastily ran back to the car to go and find help from local residents and authorities to locate his friends. A search party was organized, and several armed men spread into the forest trying to find the missing young boys. A few hours later, the bodies of George, Mark, and William were finally found huddled close to one another. They were still uneaten, but piled together by the bear in a cynical fashion. A few feet away in the bushes, a large black bear was spotted guarding its kill. The boys had all been killed in a similar way, with a quick snap of the neck with the massive weight of the black bear stomping with its front legs. It was a terrifying sight, and left researchers perplexed why the bear had carried out this predatory attack and not consumed any of the bodies of the young boys. It was thought that the bear may have been tempted by the smell of the dead trout that George had been carrying in his pocket, but could not find it. The young boys had planned their fishing trip at the last time they should have, in the new summer heat when the black bears were more likely to come closer out of the forest to search the lakes for fish. The 275-pound black bear was shot dead by the authorities, but the news of the brutal demise of the 3 young boys sent shockwaves across Canada and devastated their parents and families beyond consolation. No one expected a killer black bear to be roaming the forest, stalking the 3 young boys and leading them to their final affliction.